the future of remote speaking. We now, of course, knew that during the pandemic, we had remote speakers. Of course, there was no other option. It was impossible to travel. We couldn't meet in person. So remote speaking was the first option we used. But how does the future of remote speaking look like when we now in nearly every country face at least an easing or the complete abolishment of any restrictions, and we return to face-to-face meetings? And of course, we invited back the expert on this topic. Hello and welcome, Alan Stevens.
Nice to be here again, Niels. Thank you.
Thank you very much for taking the time again. And we talked about remote speaking before. So now when people say we crave to meet people back in person, do you think that remote speaking is going to die out in the future again?
Far from it, Niels, far from it. In fact, what's interesting, certainly interesting to me as someone who's worked in this area for a long time, is that people have now started to see some of the advantages of remote speaking. So it's not that it will die out because it's no longer necessary. It will continue because people have seen the benefits that they can get from it.
Which benefits do you refer to? What do you think are the most important aspects of that?
Okay, well, I think there are several things. I mean, obviously, there's the initial nervousness that people have of getting back together, but that will fade. That will go away. More important than that, people are looking at green issues. They're looking at the amount of travel that we all used to do, or many of us used to do, and they're thinking, is there a way of cutting down on that? I don't have to necessarily travel. Then there's the time saving, the fact that it might take 3 days to go and have a 1-hour meeting if it's in a different country, or if it's a long distance away in your own country, and they can get that time back. There's also the fact that people don't necessarily want to travel to an office to work, to go and do some stuff. They know they can do some of that from their home office or from their kitchen table even. And then there's the other issue, which is you can actually be even more productive by bringing together teams that are globally distant. And I think that's the real key to this, that there are going to be teams which form, they're in existence now, but they're going to get bigger. So you can bring in expertise from different parts of the globe, which you could never bring together in the same way before.
Yeah, also, I think when you wanted to have experts from the other end of the world, normally the budget never fit the requirement from the experts to travel across half the globe.
That's right. So you've got that as well. So I'm not saying that remote speaking will stay at the same level it is now. I think it will reduce. I think you're absolutely right. It will reduce. However, there will be times when people will look at a requirement, look at an event and say, we should do that remotely, or we should do part of that remotely, because that will be a better way of doing it than the way we used to.
Excellent. So, of course, now I prepared for this interview, and some people said we struggle to find the right online or remote speakers because suddenly during the pandemic, every expert, even the ones who are brilliant when you talk to them one-to-one, they are not particularly great at speaking online. Some of them even were great speaking on site, but not too great as soon as they sit in front of a Zoom window. So how are people able to find out if the speaker is worth their salt, worth their investment when it comes to remote speaking?
Well, of course, the classic method, which we all use, is recommendation. The fact that somebody has seen somebody speaking remotely, they've worked with them before, they know how effective they can be. So that's one way. Another way is obviously to look at the way that they deliver. So a lot of people now are putting videos up on YouTube or Vimeo or somewhere else, and you can look at them actually delivering to a remote audience and see how effective you think that is. I think there's no substitute really for getting some good information about somebody else. Everyone will tell you they're a great remote speaker. You say, are you good at speaking remotely? Yes, of course I am. Yeah. Everybody will say that. But that's no verification. There's no validity to that. What you've got to do is to check them out. There are some certification programs around. I'm not sure how valuable they are because you don't know what the criteria are and you don't know how effective those assessments are. I think the most effective way is to get a recommendation from somebody who's worked with them before. And some of the people who work most effectively remotely are people who've been TV presenters or radio presenters because they know how to communicate to an audience that they're not with. And I think the intersection between radio, TV presenters and professional speakers, which of course I sit in, is one of the places where you will find people who are very effective online.
Excellent. So when now people think of, okay, I did the remote speaking thing only because I thought it is going to go away. Now they realize in their corporate job, well, it's not going away. So I really have to become an excellent remote speaker. What are your top tips for people who still think, well, I pretty much do the same I did on site online. It doesn't really work too well. How can people improve their online speaking presence?
Well, I think one of the things that they can do, obviously, is to watch others and get some advice and tips. But there's no substitute for actually doing it yourself and then getting some feedback. So actually going out there and delivering, finding out how that works, finding out from other practitioners how effective you are. And I mean, basic tips would be, obviously, to make sure you use the camera properly. Talk to one individual. This is the thing that I always talk to people about. Any TV presenter or radio presenter will tell you the same. You have an audience of one. The audience of one is the person you're talking to through the camera or through the microphone. And that's why you use singular language. We always talk about using singular language, never how many of you, but have you ever. So that makes sure that people feel they're in a relationship with the person who's presenting. And you'll often find that over the years, people often felt that the person on television was talking directly to them, or the radio presenter knew them personally because they feel that connection because of the singular language. So I think watch people doing it, get some advice from experts that know how it works, use singular language, and keep practicing. This is not going away. This is not going away, and therefore people need to understand how they can be most effective delivering it.
Very well said. What do you think is the future of hybrid events, where you say we have a couple of people on site, we have a couple of people who sit at their desk, we have some speakers on site, some speakers do not travel, they speak from their home. Do you think that these hybrid events have a future? Because according to the largest learning platforms, Coursera and edX, I mean, Harvard, MIT, and Stanford are behind these platforms. So do you think that the future is a hybrid event future?
I do. I don't think all events will be hybrid. I don't think all meetings will be hybrid, but I think many of them will. I was sat in a hybrid meeting last night, for example. I was there in person with about 20 other people, and there were a couple of dozen people online on a big Zoom screen. It's going to happen, again, for the reasons that I've already talked about earlier in this chat. And I think what will happen is that people will think this can be an efficient way of delivering. So I think people will look at the issue, they'll look at the requirement, and they'll say, you need to be here in person. We can do this remotely, or it's going to take a mixture of remote and in person, i.e. a hybrid event. So I would hope very much that people look at what's the most effective way of delivering this, rather than we have to do it this way because that's where the people are. That's the wrong way to look at it. You've got to look at the problem first and then find the solution.
I think that is an excellent piece of advice here. When we talk about larger events now, and people say, how do I really find the right ratio between having speakers on site or having speakers talking from a remote location? Is it like 2-to-1, 1-to-1? Is it 50-50? Or should I have all of them on site and just one special expert from talking from a remote location? Do you have any experiences in that area? Because, of course, people want to keep their on-site events as vivid and as alive as possible.
Well, here, the analogy that I use here, and it's an analogy I've used before, is it's a TV show with a studio audience. So the issue which is being faced by the organizers and by the presenters is, how do you keep both of those audiences happy? So it's not a question of the balance between the online and the offline. It's a question of whether both audiences are engaged all the time. Now, that may mean you treat audiences differently. For example, if you have speakers and you have breaks between speakers, the in-house audience will go and have a coffee break, or they'll go to the bathroom or something like that. Whereas the people who are online will want something going on. They might want to see a panel discussion from a studio. They might have a bit of Q&A with one of the speakers. So in other words, what you've got to do, you've got to balance the needs of each audience with what's being delivered. So basically, you've got to create a TV show. And that's what hybrid events will become. They will be TV shows delivered from different locations using people online and people offline. And it's going to require TV producer skills. It's going to require TV presenter skills. And those are the sorts of things people are not thinking about at the moment.
And that sounds like that the usual approach of, we have our annual meeting and someone from HR does it on the side. That should not be the way how they should do it then.
No. And of course, you can always get somebody from HR to come and run the event and be the MC, and it might work. But of course, we all know that the issue with a professional presenter or a professional MC or facilitator or host is that they know what to do when things go wrong. And things will go wrong. Somebody won't be online at the right time, or the technology won't work, or something will happen that delays the event, which means that the person isn't ready. All of those things need to be managed mainly by the facilitator, by the MC, and somebody who is the person from accounts or the person from HR they won't be able to cope and the whole thing will fall apart. So I think one of the skills that's going to be really important in the future with regard to hybrid events is the skill of a hybrid MC or facilitator who can hold all of that together. Those people will be very valuable.
I think these are the perfect final words for this podcast. We see that the future of remote speaking seems to be a bright one, and I fully support that point, because we see that not only from a greener point of view running businesses, but also from a practical point of view, getting the experts from all over the globe and your teams from all over the globe together has huge benefits for organizations. So there's only one thing for me left to say at the end of this podcast. Alan, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much, Niels. It's been a pleasure as always.